A 5-year-old child with a wooden sword in hand. At 7, forbidden to eat with her sisters. At 12, battlefields soaked in blood. This is not a story of cruelty. It is the brutal reality of how samurai forged warriors within their own homes. While the world saw only katanas and armor, behind the doors of paper and wood, a transformation as violent as it was silent was taking place. What you are about to discover will forever change your view of these legendary warriors. Life inside a samurai household began long before sunrise. While mist still shrouded the meticulously tended gardens, the entire family was already awake. But don't think we're talking about a cozy breakfast or morning hugs, no. We're talking about a system of discipline so rigid that it transformed children into war machines before they even understood what it meant to be human. And it all began with a simple but devastating rule. At the age of 5, a samurai boy received his first wooden sword. It wasn't a toy. It was the beginning of a journey that would only end with death. The patriarch of a samurai family was not merely the head of the household, he was considered practically a living god within those walls. Even the shogun, the supreme leader of Japan, dared not interfere in the domestic affairs of a samurai family. The father held absolute power over life and death, decisions and destinies. He approved marriages, controlled property, determined careers, and, under Japanese law, was personally responsible for every action of any family member. If a son committed a crime, the father would pay the price. If a daughter dishonored the family name, it was the patriarch who would face the consequences. This monumental weight created an atmosphere of constant tension, where every word, every gesture, every decision was calculated with military precision. But here's something that will surprise you. The true commander of the household wasn't the father. It was the mother. While male samurai spent their days in the daimyo's castle, training, fighting, or managing lands, female samurai were the undisputed queens of the domestic domain. They were called Okugata-sama, which literally means she who stays at home. But don't be fooled by that title. These women managed all the family finances, supervised servants, educated the children, kept meticulous records, cared for elderly relatives, and, amazingly, were trained in deadly combat. Their weapon of choice was the naginata, a spear with a curved blade at the tip. And here's the shocking detail. DNA analysis from ancient battlefields revealed that approximately 30% of the bodies found were those of women. 30%. This means that female samurai warriors were not rare exceptions. They were a significant and deadly force. When a young samurai woman married, she would take her naginata to her husband's house. Officially, it was for moral training. In practice, it was a silent declaration. I can protect you and I can kill you. These women learned not only to fight, but also the art of tanto jutsu, combat with small knives that could be concealed. They learned kyujutsu, the art of archery. They learned tessen jutsu, combat with war fans, that served both for defense and attack. And all this while managing an entire estate, raising children, organizing ceremonies, maintaining political alliances through elaborate gift exchanges, and ensuring that the family's honor remained intact. A samurai wife who failed in any of these responsibilities could be sent back to her parents' home in disgrace, a humiliation worse than death. Now let's talk about the children. At the age of 7, boys and girls were separated, literally separated. They could no longer eat together. They couldn't play together. This brutal division had a specific purpose, to break any emotional bond that could weaken their dedication to Bushido. The boys began intense training that was anything but playful. They woke before dawn for Zen meditation. They spent hours practicing sword strikes until their hands bled. They studied calligraphy until every stroke was perfect. They learned poetry, military strategy, clan history, and the teachings of Confucius. But the most terrifying training took place in the sanctuaries. The young samurai were taken to temples where they spent entire nights in vigil. The only thing allowed was strong tea to keep them awake. The goal was to induce a trance state, a mystical experience where, teetering between life and death, the young man would make a spiritual journey to the world of the dead. There, they said, the spirits of the ancestors would offer them ancient knowledge. And you, what do you think about this extreme method of raising children? Was this harshness necessary, or was it simply cruel? Leave your opinion in the comments. To master self-hypnosis and intuitive mental work, the young samurai needed absolute control over his body and mind. He had to be able to zombify himself at will. This training gave him the ability to hold red-hot iron with his bare hands without feeling pain, to maintain composure in any challenging or unexpected situation, to be ready to die in cold blood or perform seppuku, ritual suicide. That's right. 12-year-old children were already being psychologically prepared to take their own lives if honor demanded it. At 12 years old, a samurai boy already accompanied his father on real military campaigns. Real battlefields, real death, real blood. There was no room for childhood as we know it. The Genpuku ceremony marked the official transition to adulthood, generally occurring between the ages of 12 and 17. During this ceremony, the young man received his adult name, the shonmage hairstyle where the hair was shaved at the front and tied in a top knot, and finally received his swords, the daisho, the sacred pair consisting of the long katana and the short wakizashi. From that moment on, he was no longer a child. He was a complete warrior, responsible for killing and dying in the name of his lord. And here's something disturbing. If the father died, the eldest son assumed the role of head of the family even if he was still technically a boy, being mentored by older clan members until he reached full maturity. Family relationships followed a rigid Confucian hierarchy. The son had what was called an irredeemable debt to his father. It was considered an obligation that could never be fully repaid. Therefore, on birthdays, it was the father who received the main congratulations, not the son. Filial piety was so extreme that it surpassed the natural love for one's own children. A samurai placed the well-being of his father above that of his own children, but here is the shocking twist. When a son reached adulthood, his own mother had to begin to obey him. The woman who raised him, who protected him, who managed the entire household, now had to bow before him. Of course, in practice, there was immense respect and love for widowed mothers, and Japanese history is full of moving accounts of samurai caring for their mothers. But the legal and social structure placed the adult son above her. Marriages were completely arranged. For high-ranking samurai, this was an absolute necessity, as they rarely had opportunities to meet women outside of formal ceremonies. For lower-ranking samurai, it was a formality. Most samurai married women from other samurai families, solidifying political and military alliances. But lower-ranking samurai could marry commoners. When this happened, a messenger was sent with betrothal money, or a note granting tax exemption to ask for the bride's parents' acceptance. Many parents gladly accepted, as elevating a daughter to the samurai class was an extraordinary honor. Marriage wasn't about love, it was about strategy, lineage, and power. And let's talk about concubines. Wealthy samurai often brought concubines into their homes. These women lived under the authority of the principal wife, who in turn served under the authority of the eldest woman in the house, usually the husband's mother. The background of these concubines was rigorously checked by high-ranking samurai. In many cases, the relationship was treated almost like a marriage, but the concubine would never have the status or power of the legitimate wife. This structure created complex tensions, secret alliances, and subtle power games within the very walls of the house. Each samurai family had its own house code, known as kakun. These codes were passed down from the head of the family to the younger men, especially the heirs. The kakun served as moral and behavioral guides, establishing specific rules on how a family member should act, serve, fight, and die. Some clans had codes with over 100 detailed articles. The Chosokabe Code, for example, had articles dealing with legalities, taxes, official procedures, and even regulations concerning Buddhist priests. These codes were not suggestions. They were absolute laws within that house, and violating them could result in expulsion from the clan or worse, forced seppuku. The architecture of samurai houses reflected this discipline. The residences were modest in external appearance, but strategically designed. Only samurai could have walls and gates, a symbol of status and a first line of defense. Inside, the houses used sliding paper doors, fusuma, and tatami mats that allowed for flexibility in the spaces. There were special alcoves called tokonoma to display art or family heirlooms. Small gardens, often Zen gardens with carefully arranged stones and combed gravel, offered spaces for contemplation and spiritual practice. But make no mistake, everything had a purpose. The gardens taught patience and attention to detail. The flexible rooms allowed a living space to be quickly transformed into a training hall or a war room. Even the simplicity of the materials, wood, and paper, was a constant reminder of the samurai values of humility and impermanence. The diet was strictly controlled. Bushido promoted discipline and moderation in all aspects of life, including food. Overeating was seen as weakness. Samurai consumed simple meals based on rice, fish, vegetables, and fermented foods. Their diet was influenced by Buddhist principles and the need to maintain physical strength for combat. Certain types of meat were avoided, and periods of fasting were observed. Sake, rice wine, was consumed, but always within strict social customs and etiquette. Drinking too much was shameful. Losing control was unacceptable. Even during the prolonged peace of the Edo period, from 1603 to 1868, discipline at home did not diminish. The samurai became bureaucrats, but domestic life maintained the same military rigor. Children still trained, women still managed with an iron fist. The codes were still followed, because for a samurai, life at home was not separate from life at war. It was the same battlefield, only fought differently. Every meal was an opportunity to practice self-control. Every family interaction was a test of hierarchy and respect. Every moment was a preparation for death. The most shocking truth about samurai domestic life is this: there was no distinction between public and private, between warrior and father, between wife and protector. Everything was Bushido. Everything was discipline. The home was not a refuge from the violent world outside. It was where that world was most intensely lived and perpetuated. It was where future warriors were forged with the same meticulous precision a blacksmith used to bend steel thousands of times until creating a perfect katana. Each bend was a lesson. Each hammer blow was a rule. And the end product was a human being capable of extraordinary and terrible things. If you were fascinated by discovering this hidden side of samurai discipline, the one that took place far from the battlefields but was equally brutal and transformative, like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more surprising revelations about the world of the samurai. Every week we bring you stories that go beyond the legends and show the raw reality of these legendary warriors.